Hi everyone, welcome back to the Watch Insider. My name is Brian and thank you guys for logging on. I am joined today by Tim, who you guys all know very well. And a shout out to my wife Chelsea, who is definitely not watching this right now, but if you are, I will not be home in time for Valentine's Day dinner because we are doing Watch Insider today.
And as I always like to say, we get a few thousand views. They can't all be my mom, so now I know they're also Chelsea.
Every blue moon she logs onto the show to to critique me, but no. So we've got a great show tonight. Lots of great watches. The theme this week is actually inspired from a comment from the show last week, who asked that we bring on some, I'd say, more value-centric choices. So all of the watches that you're going to see tonight that are here on the table are sub $10,000 price point. All of them are pre-owned, all of them are available on our website, and it's an eclectic mix. So don't just think that you're going to be seeing nothing but some Mariners, and we already know that you guys are fully aware of those watches. But let's kick us off with a wrist check real fast.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so you guys know my Reverso Tourbillon. It's a 2003 limited edition, platinum case, white gold movement, beautiful tourbillon carriage, hand engraved Gudron. And I gotta say, for a watch with a gold movement and a tourbillon, it's probably just as appealing on the dial side with the coaxial power reserve. It's actually a ruthenium-coated white gold dial, and then the numerals are hand-painted on. This, regardless of what I add for all eternity, will always be the flagship of my collection and my favorite piece.
That watch is absolutely amazing. I mean, I think that the ruthenium, the mixture of the grays, I think is just absolutely amazing.
And that's on the dial side.
Yeah. No, and then you got the the guts in there. Let's do one more flip here so everybody can see it, which is absolutely beautiful. And this is a level of craftsmanship that I think is just one of the reasons why Jaeger-LeCoultre deserves the accolades that it gets.
Yeah, they can do anything when they put their minds to it. You want top level finish, you got it. And then again, that was 1 year before FP Journe went full 18 karat in the movements.
So here I have a FP Journe rose gold 38 millimeter calendrier. So this is a watch that I absolutely love. You've got here the rose gold case, you've got here the white gold dial. The calendrier has since been discontinued. So this was FP Journe's annual calendar movement. He's since discontinued this watch in favor of the perpetual. What's really special about this particular example is that this is actually a 38 millimeter case with the rose gold movement. So for those that don't know, here, Tim, I'll take this off so you can do some movement shots. For those that don't know, the 38 millimeter FP Journes were discontinued about 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, in favor of now the 40 and the 42. The reason being is that collectors just weren't purchasing the 38 millimeter size anymore. And once he announced that he was discontinuing the 38 size, everybody now wants 38 millimeter watches. So these particular 38 millimeter rose gold movements were produced in very limited quantities and were primarily sold through the boutique network because at the time, authorized dealers really only wanted to take 40 millimeter watches. So it's a beautiful example of the watch. And I just think for a sort of everyday wear, you've got a very neutral color scheme in the rose gold with the gray. It doesn't scream off the wrist. To me, the 38 millimeters are the best fitting of his cases, and I just absolutely love the watch.
Very practical too, and even though jumping from month to month can be a little bit of a sojourn up and down the retrograde, it is a watch for which all calendar indications can be controlled through the crown, which I love.
Yeah, and in full agreement, I think that's the only quirk of the watch that really bothers me is, as you guys can probably see, I just didn't have the month set or the date. The reason being is that, I set the time, but in order to set the date properly, you have to scroll through, continuously until you get to the right month, and I honestly just couldn't bring myself to spend the time.
Yeah, plus, if the watch were too perfect, it wouldn't be a luxury, because luxury requires that you give a little bit of the rational part of your brain and just evacuate it.
Yeah.
So you've got that imperfection that makes it better.
Yeah. So I will hi to everybody in the chat, by the way. Thank you guys for logging on. A lot of our usuals are are here, and we appreciate the support. So I'll get us started with the first watch. It's a watch after my own heart. Tim, I will give this to you to hold up. So this is the now discontinued 40 millimeter platinum dial Rolex Yacht-Master. So this watch has since been discontinued in favor of it was the blue dial variation, and now it is a rhodium finished dial, if I'm not mistaken.
What they're calling it is, they're calling it a dark rhodium. It came out at Baselworld 2016, and it's effectively this watch, but the distinction is that you've got a different coloration to the dial. It's not platinum, it's actually a sort of a grayish that's almost like what you see on my tourbillon. And that features a few small, almost cyan blue accents. So that's what replaced this. But what I hold in my hand is the original, I want to say 16622. It's a special piece, and it has a grained platinum dial. It has a platinum bezel. It has a stainless steel case, and this is what Rolex calls Rolesium, which is an alloy-sounding name for two metals physically occupying the same space. It's not an alloy, but you got the platinum bezel, the maxi dial, which is larger indices like you wouldn't see on a Rolex sub until the 2003 anniversary. And then you've got that platinum grained dial underneath with the flashes of red to set it apart. This was effectively the upscale sports watch. Launched in 1992, the idea was originally to make the Yacht-Master what the Submariner effectively couldn't be, which was a pure luxury watch. So this one, 100 meters water resistant rather than 300, and with a bidirectional rotating bezel rather than unidirectional, was a water sports watch for those who tended to do their seafaring on the deck of a yacht rather than the seas below.
Yeah, so I absolutely love this watch. I think that it is a true classic. You know, it's got this just pure luxury appeal to it on the wrist that I just think is absolutely amazing. And what I really like about the watch is that it does really set itself apart from the Submariner. It's really different. You know, one of the hurdles that the watch had was the price point because of the platinum dial. You know, it made it a little bit more expensive than getting just a standard Rolex sport piece. The reason why this watch, you know, means so much to me is not this particular example, but the first really nice watch that I had, not to sound like an ass, I got for my bar mitzvah, was the 35 millimeter version of this watch, which I absolutely loved. And, you know, I've since sold the watch or traded it in for something else. I don't even remember what it was, but to this day, I actually regret selling it. I wish that I had the watch, and I just think that, you know, this particular piece is a true work of art. And you know, I know that they discontinued it in the sense that Rolex has to consistently update and change the dial configurations, but I think that this is one of the better sports pieces that they've made.
Also, I'd say, don't feel too bad. Matt Farah over on The Smoking Tire, also on YouTube, he got a Corvette with his bar mitzvah money, so if you got a watch, don't worry, you've already been one-upped. But this is a great watch. Matt Farah also has the anniversary sub, so you could argue he's got a surplus of good fortune. Matt, give us a call. We got some watches. I know you've had some watches lately. We've got better. But the theme tonight is sub $10,000 watches, and we've got a broad spectrum of them. So let's go crazy. Let's go completely nuts.
Fine. We're going to start with the Valentine's Day special. So it is Valentine's Day. I had to have one ladies' piece on the show just for, I don't know, for and giggles here. So this particular piece is the Hublot Big Bang Pop Art. And honestly, like, I love this watch. So I think that nailing a nice ladies' watch is an extremely difficult task because for most ladies' pieces, the end goal is what ladies' watch can we make that they only need to have one watch and that they can wear this watch all day, every day, whether it's black tie, for dress, or for sport. And that's when you see particularly either, you know, Rolexes or Cartier's Patek's or AP Royal Oaks. And Hublot, I think, always knocks it out of the park with these really eclectic artistic pieces. And I really like the color scheme of the watch. I think that, you know, it screams Hublot, but C, it really is a conversation piece and the kind of watch that can be worn as an accessory, which, you know, I've always been a fan. I really liked all the color schemes that they made. These particular watches were all done as a limited edition, and they all sold out pretty quick. And this is the only watch on the table that we actually have listed for $10,950, so it's listed for above 10, but I figured we would sell it for a little bit below 10, so I would just include it with the mix.
So guys, if you've now scorched your retina, I'm not legally liable. Send your complaints to YouTube for any ocular damage that you may sustain. The watch, quite honestly, is completely without pretense. Yes, I can practically taste bubblegum in my mouth just looking at it. And yes, it is so bright that you can see it from space. But the bottom line is this is probably the best expression of a ladies' watch that you can beat to death. I used to think that Panerai guys were hardest on their watches, working in pre-owned watches, until I started to see ladies' watches come in. and I realized that
We don't hold a candle.
Yeah, exactly. You need to have like the Rolex Deep Sea Challenge on a woman's wrist to like sustain the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that a lady's watch encounters. So that watch right there, 100 meters water resistant in steel with spinel stones, is actually just what the doctor ordered.
And you even have like, you have the pop art color scheme going around the numerals here. I just think that it's a beautifully executed watch, and I think that it makes a really loud and impressive statement for the price point, which is what I really liked about the watch.
And look, guys, this is a watch completely without pretense. Is it ridiculous? Yes. Is it desirable solely on that basis? Also, yes.
Yes, I mean, again, this is not the watch that that a lady's gonna wear and it's gonna be her only watch, right? This is the sort of watch that it could be her third, fourth, or fifth watch, and I just think that it makes a great option, and it's a really cool piece to have in the arsenal. So it's no different than having, like, when a guy whips out the all yellow, AP diver, or the orange diver, or anything like that. I mean, you're not wearing that watch every day. It's really like an accent statement piece to your collection.
Or a King Gold Hublot Big Bang. So guys, I can see a lot of friends joining us. I want to give a shout out to Sasa B, who says, my eyes hurt from that Hublot. Mine too. I see True Lie, not a fan, saying ghastly. Shannon, green, pink, orange, steel, WTF. You know what, guys? I think we get the message, but I'm glad to see all of you in here. Fjord, Prefect, Thumper, JDM, Robert Dixon from Scotland, Don Gizzle from Germany, Eddie Landsberg. I love the emoji, unmentionable, and Russell996 and AMG. All right, let's apply some detox right here. I've got something for those of you. This is a watch from Bremont. This is the Dha8 Limited Edition from 2016. So let's look at a less estrogen-charged limited edition. Guys, this will be right up your alley. A luxury watch that's aviation-themed. This is a wonderful departure from the conventional aviator's watch aesthetic and feature set that you get from the likes of IWC and Breitling and Longines and Zenith. This is a timepiece that came out in 2016 celebrating the DH-88 that made the once unfathomable 7-day transit from England to Australia in 1934. Now, the timepiece actually features a component from the DH-88 that made the trip underneath. This is actually undercarriage wood from that original aircraft, and it's incorporated into a timepiece that features a highly customized Valjoux 7754 in chronometer spec, 282 pieces. You get a internal rotating bezel, which you could see can be used just like a Rolex GMT to gauge 3 time zones simultaneously. It has an independent 24-hour hand that can be set to a second time zone. You get the chronograph, internal rotating bezel, 100-meter water resistance, a nifty vintage aesthetic that nevertheless doesn't seem to directly plagiarize old flight deck instruments. This is one of the more appealing pilot-style watches I've seen in the last couple of years, and it's even 100 meters water resistant, which means throw it on a more aquatically themed strap, perhaps a NATO, perhaps rubber, and this could be your only watch. It's formal enough that yes, you could wear it with a suit jacket, it's rugged enough that you can take it on any vacation, and it's got the functionality with the dual time zone and the chronograph that you have both the most practical complication and, in the chrono, the king of complications. That's a piece I love, well under $10,000 for the DH-88.
Yeah, I mean, one small quirk I tend to agree with Jogbird in the chat is that I just don't love the date placement either. It sort of ruins the subdial to me. I also think the watch is a little bit big. I wish that it was a little bit thinner, a little bit smaller. And the only other thing, which, I mean, again, it's just preference on a watch like this, I maybe would have gone with a brush finish.
That's a valid complaint. I got to say, Bremont, because they basically got one case for them, and let's be honest, they've got one case. They have to vary the finish. They go satin, they go blasted, or they go polished.
Yeah.
For now, I think it's an appropriate application of polish because it's such a rare watch. As limited editions go in this day and age, AP, Hublot, 282 pieces is pretty scarce. So to try to set it apart, I don't disagree with the decision. I do think as a pure pilot's watch, a matte finish would have made more sense.
So, no, but great piece nonetheless, and it really does hit that price point. Moving right along, what should we pick now? You already showed this one, so we will go with it. We'll give this to you to show. So this is a Frank Mueller Cintre Curvex watch, titanium carbon fiber dial, Marcus and Company signed with Watchland, where all the watches are made. So this watch has so much going on, and I was just having the typical Frank Mueller discussion that you have to have with everybody now is, what's happened to the value of Frank Mueller watches, so on and so forth. I still think that their watches are freaking gorgeous, and I do think that at some point, this brand, or at least these older watches, are going to come back because the price points now are super reasonable, and the watches happen to be absolutely awesome. And I think that Frank Mueller nailed the tonneau-shaped case, and nobody's really done it as well as the Curvex. So this particular example in the titanium with the carbon fiber dial gives you a dressy, sporty feel. Do I love the strap option that we have on this? Honestly, probably not. I think that we could change it up a little bit, put something else on there. But you could put a rubber on this. You could put a Croc. You could even do like a red Croc and go absolutely crazy. So lots of options. I just, I was looking through the drawer. I was thinking, you know what? Like, I'm a big fan of the Curvex, and I want to bring one on the show.
Yeah, and it's a handsome watch that wears light on the wrist because of the shape of it. I mean, it's got a cambered case. It's also got a cambered sapphire, and that's an underrated part of the Frank Mueller watches. That's not easy to manufacture and achieve a water-resistant fit. Watchland, for those who are wondering, is actually the enormous watchmaking campus that Frank Mueller built outside of Geneva, and they do a lot of work for other brands. It's a huge facility. They just opened 2 new buildings. They inaugurated them during their own exhibition. They've gotten to the point where they actually have a rival to SIHH running at the same time. That's how big they are as a watchmaking enterprise. Basically, an enormous factory complex that happens to own a brand, Frank Mueller, with tremendous capability. That's what Watchland is, but if you never visited Geneva and you're not in the watch industry, you could forever wonder. For me, this thing is crying out for a contrasting stitch in red.
Yeah.
If you had double stitch red and white in black, you'd really be onto something. And as comfortable as this watch wears, when you compound it with that beautiful satin finish titanium, yeah. Let's do a wrist check.
Yeah, so I'll throw this on the wrist real quick. I'm not going to bend the strap, but the watch happens to fit. I mean, my skin could not be more pale relative to the color of this watch, but it fits extraordinarily well. It's not imposing at all, and I think that the contrasting size to the funkiness of the watch just gives it such good appeal. And, by no means am I saying that, like, these are the most collectible watches or these watches are going to hold their value the best. These are just really cool watches under the $10,000 price point that I think are fun, unique, and, when buying pre-owned, a really good value and a cool piece to add to the collection. So I really like this watch, and, I really do think that as time goes on, you're going to start seeing customers put Curvex is back on their wrist.
Yeah, I think the Frank Mueller thing, it was in style in the 90s. It had a strong run to the mid-2000s. I think it's currently at a low ebb, and these are buy low watches because I think the style's going to come back. Remember, he did not invent the tonneau case. That's of another era.
Yeah.
And just as it came back once, it will come back again.
Yeah, and to answer questions in the chat about what happened to the pricing of Frank Mueller, I think it was a mixture of 2 things: extraordinarily high retails, overproduction, and a shift in demand and customer, call it taste and preference. And in addition, the brand at the time was extremely difficult to work with, and I think that retailers really were moving away from wanting to work with the brand, which really decreased the amount of pushing that was going on. So you had watches that were in all stainless steel with diamonds that were priced crazy high, and for a long time those watches were selling really well. But the moment that those watches stop selling really well, they start only selling for what people think that they're worth. And when you take that watch that may have had a retail in the tens of thousands and start comparing it to a Cartier Santos or a Pasha or a Rolex, you start saying, well, I can have one of those watches or I can have the Frank Mueller, and I'm not going to pay double or triple the price. So the prices then get, chopped by a huge degree, and you're then selling into a diminished level of demand. So on top of customers being told, listen, this is what your watch is now worth, after that happened, nobody wanted to buy the Frank Mueller watches. And then now, I think that they're great watches that can be purchased, at really good prices and really good values.
I would also say this, they were a little bit of a victim of their own success. They became like the expensive Bell & Ross, basically, where you have one really successful design and you iterate it endlessly in a million variations and materials and sizes. People can burn out. But I do agree with what Thumper JDM is saying in our live chat, that Franck Mueller buyers shifted to Hublot. There is a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
The guy who wants the big crazy thing on his wrist and doesn't really care what's ticking inside, right around 2005, when the Big Bang came out, you can actually see a tapering of Franck Mueller's U.S. Sales and fortunes, and it really started back then. So that is no coincidence. I do think there's a lot of truth to that. I also want to give a shout out to Sasha B from Belgrade. I'm sorry I mangled your name before. I Like Watches is joining us. I see Steve Bowden, Carlos T, Ray Bonifond, Philip Hayden. Questions from Philip. Okay, hey guys, thinking of trading in my vintage Air King for a two-tone Datejust. Thoughts? Let's break this into two parts. First, trading a vintage watch for a new watch. Would you do that? And second, what do you think of the specific swap between an old Air King and a two-tone Datejust?
So, I think that there's nothing wrong with trading a vintage watch towards a new, a vintage watch towards a new watch. Simply because sometimes you're tired of your older watch and you want to trade into something new. So I think the first question is are you trading into a new style Datejust, or are you trading into a sort of an older vintage Datejust? Because there's definitely a difference in the feel and look between the two watches. I mean, even though Rolex technically calls everything the same case size, so on and so forth through time, the watches do look extraordinarily different. So I think that's question number one. Number two, if you can afford it, I would say to keep both. Like, I think that a vintage Air King is just such a cool watch, and I really do think that you can wear both of those watches at different times, right? One's not necessarily like, oh, I'm not going to pick up the Air King because I'm going to pick up the Datejust. I think that the Datejust two-tone is also an icon. It's probably, if you search online, one of the most listed Rolexes that there is.
Yeah, I think short of a sub, that's probably the watch that you would pick as the Rolex, the Datejust. It was incredibly important from the launch of the first one in 1945. It's got a longer history than the sub, which didn't come on the scene until 1953. It's the watch Winston Churchill wore, and let's face it, guys, he had a pretty big wrist and he wore it with style. So I think it's a more versatile watch than people let on. All of this said, I do think you have to cut to the core of the question of swapping a vintage watch for a new watch.
He mentioned that he's doing a vintage Datejust.
Okay, in that case, I would still say this. Vintage watches are not serialized or duplicates of each other. If you're trading a new sub for a new Datejust and vice versa, you can always unwind the trade and go back because you'll find another one. If there's anything about your Air King that's distinctive,
or if it's sentimental.
Yeah, if it's got some sentimental value, and that goes for any watch that's tied to an important milestone in your life or time or person, just make sure that if you do the deal, that you won't regret it, because that's something, unless you trade it to a friend who keeps the watch and offers it back to you, it's sort of a one-shot deal that you can never unwind, trading an old watch that's distinctive, because you may never find one like it again.
Exactly, and if it's bothering you that you've been wearing the same watch over and over and over again, and you're just getting an itch for something different, but you still really like the watch, maybe pop off the bracelet and put on a cool strap. It's always an option, gives it a different look, completely different feel, and you'll get that sort of sense of like a new watch on the wrist without having to go and get rid of the watch. So.
Great question coming in from Carlos T. Tim, I know it's a bit off topic. What are your thoughts on the new full stainless steel Cartier Santos Large with skeleton movement? He says that I really like the watch, looking forward to try it, but would it be a cool daily? I think so. I'm happy to say that I actually saw the watch, I held it, I wore it at SIHH this year. It's the first application of a hand-finished skeleton movement in a steel Cartier, so you're paying for the watchmaking, not the precious metal, which I like. It does have the same quick release strap system, and it is adaptable to the same Easy Link sizable bracelet that you can size and remove with just your thumbnail. So I like the substance of the watch. 100 meters water resistant. You're absolutely right about wearing this every day. I guess the question is, how do you feel about the skeleton dial?
I don't think it's an everyday watch.
I think you can. I think you can wear it every day. I do, but you have to be comfortable with a dial that is marginally legible.
So you'd wear a skeleton every single day?
I'm wearing a tourbillon every single day.
Yeah, but it's different. I mean, again, your tourbillon watch is a little bit more understated. It's got a classic Reverso look, especially on the one side. You tend not to be wearing it all the time, with the tourbillon facing out. I just think with a skeleton, as awesome as the watch is, you know, if you're wearing that every day, number one, you're going to get tired of looking at your wrist at some point. Number two, I just think that a skeleton is a great watch to have in a collection, but especially to rotate in and out as you're wearing other pieces.
Here's the thing. If you like the watch, and you say you do, nothing about the in-person experience is going to disappoint you. You're going to go from liking it, I think, to loving it. The only reason I would say a skeleton watch is not an everyday watch is if you have trouble reading it, and only you can determine for sure. But for me, steel, 100 meters water-resistant, quick-release strap, a reasonable price, I mean, any precious metal watch is going to be more vulnerable on your wrist, so start with that assumption. And as far as making a statement with a skeleton, yeah, I suppose it's a little bit more out there than a standard Rolex, but on the other hand, a lot of people think that like wearing a Rolex is doing this, so a Cartier still, I think so. It's not foul language.
Are we allowed to do that on the air, team?
YouTube doesn't
well,
know. YouTube can't scan for this.
I'm getting a yes, so we're allowed to do that on the air.
So for me, it's actually a little bit, it's almost unassuming compared to a Rolex. Yeah, I'm saying Cartier is unassuming compared to a Rolex. Again, I think this is going to come down to personal style tastes and legibility, because some folks are going to look at that watch and be like, I got no idea what time it is.
Yeah, I mean,
it's today. I'm
a fan of the watch. You know, me personally, if I was getting a skeletonized watch, you know, I think that the Ulysse Nardin, you know, skeletonized tourbillon is a great option. It's a great price point. You know, I do think that that's actually a sport piece that you could wear every day.
It is.
Especially, you know, you've got the rubber strap. You can put it on a Croc strap. You know, and the price point is actually pretty darn reasonable. I think it's like $38,000 for a skeletonized tourbillon.
I think it's even less. I think it's like 28.
Yeah.
I mean, if you guys haven't seen the new Marine tourbillon with the Grand Faux enamel Flinke dial,
amazing.
It's a guilloche and enameled flying tourbillon in steel that you can wear in the water for under 30 grand. You got to see this.
So we actually ordered that one for stock, believe it or not, just because I think that UN is actually. They sort of, you know, I don't want to use like a ship reference for UN, but like, because I just think it's like,
sure.
You know, but, you know,
that
they turned
the
ship around. They turned the ship around.
They did. There goes our $10,000 watch theme. Let's get back on track.
Yeah, okay. So, back on track. So, what'd you pick up here?
A big old Bomba from the year 2000.
So here we have the PAM 64, aka the La Bamba. So this particular watch was made in 500 examples, and it was limited to 500 pieces in the year 2000. You know, it's extremely thick. It's got a very cool chunky feel to it. I guess the closest comparison that I could say about this watch is that if you were comparing the PAM 64 to the PAM 24, which, you know, I don't have a picture of, is sort of like comparing the Sea Dweller to the Submariner. You have the helium escape valve here on the side. We've got the black calfskin contrast stripping strap, and it's just an awesome, very cool watch.
You could also compare it to the difference between, if you want to compare this to the PAM 25 or the 24, it's like the difference between Barry Bonds in 1992 versus 2002. This thing is absolutely juiced. Big, thick, bold, still a 44 millimeter, guys. If you can wear a standard 44 Luminor, you can wear this. Now, obviously, the 87 came after, and with that came a blue dial. There was a change to the 87 after the F series. From the F series forward to the H series, they changed the look so it didn't look as much like this one. But this is the one that guys refer to as the definitive Bomba. It's beautifully big, bold. It has that gorgeous off-axis distortion of a 5 millimeter sapphire. Things get crazy when sapphires get really thick, and that's part of the lovable quality of this watch. It's one of the earliest of the Panerai Special Series, as the series only started in 1997 with the PAM 21. So for all practical intents and purposes, this was one of those flags that flies forever. The first no-holds-barred diving Panerai, and still one of the favorites. To this day, a very wearable, beatable, usable, and collectible watch. And again, under $10,000, so still affordable.
I love that sort of brown patina that you have on the indices. I think that it faded really nicely. And even though the watch is a 44 millimeter submersible, it fits smaller than that. I think that's because of the curvature of the lugs, how they have a sharp come down.
It has the same footprint on your wrist as any Luminor. It's no bigger.
I'll throw this on here. So, I've got me and Tim both have relatively small wrists, and I think that if I was wearing a rubber strap with the tang, it would probably fit a little bit more snug. But even at 44, which the submersibles, the newer submersibles tend to look really big on my wrist, I think that this actually fits extraordinarily well. So, you know, you make that big bulky statement with, you know, the Panerai sub, but that's sort of the statement that this watch is meant to make.
Panerai was never supposed to look compact on your wrist. In fact, Panerai wasn't supposed to look anything on your wrist because you were supposed to wear it in the water at night while blowing up British ships in Alexandria Harbor. So the bottom line is, for something that was designed not to be seen, it looks pretty good. And that's kind of a quality that's universal to the type. But the 64 is the first of the super serious submersible Luminors. And in my opinion, considering how many times they've iterated the diver, owning the best early example means you own the best, period. I don't care about in-house movements. Historically, Panerai never had those. I don't care about color. That's voguish. That's something that's going to come and go and come again. That's cyclical. But for me, an original with the original tritium dial, with that classic distorted look.
Is it a tritium dial?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, it's a tritium dial. And if you get really close, you can see the Panerai Extreme divers stayed with the tritium dial much longer than the regular series. The limited series divers, I want to say right up to about 2005, continued to use the tritium dial because it was self-activating and didn't need to be charged. You could pull it out of a dive locker and it would still be glowing a year later. That said, it has a 12.5-year half-life, which means that eventually it will fade, but the good news is that means it just becomes more beautiful.
Yeah, so awesome watch. And again, just to reiterate, you know, all these watches that we're talking about are available on the website. So moving on.
Full disclosure, we sell watches.
Yeah, we always have to give, like, you know, that disclosure on the watch. Like, what do you mean these guys sell watches? But no, so I have a great watch here. I'll let Tim show it. So the Breguet Marine Big Date. So this is a watch that I am a absolutely huge fan of. And, you know, more than ever before, I think that, you know, Breguet needs a righting of the ship. You know, they've got the history, they've got the watchmaking capabilities. They really just need to, you know, focus in on some of the design aesthetics and a little bit of the marketing. I think that you're going to see Breguet, you know, back being one of the big three again. This particular watch, the Breguet Marine Big Date, is beautifully executed, and to me is the true competition for the Patek 5167. So if you're looking at a steel sports watch that's understated, that can be worn all the time from one of the top manufacturers, that can be worn for sport, can be worn for dress, you could wear this thing with a tuxedo, this is the watch. And what really separates this watch from the 5167 Aquanaut is the Big Date feature. I love a big date. I think that it is one of the coolest complications out there. In particular, what I like about this watch is the blackened date windows, which really allows the date to blend in with the dial itself and not really be imposing or, you know, overly pop too much. You've got the guilloche center there. The watch is rich looking, beautifully executed, fits amazing, and more than anything else, you can get these watches at a great value at sub $10,000, which is absolutely awesome.
Yeah, so guys, this is the reference 5817, and it's 39 millimeters, so in terms of size, it is a one-for-one trade for something like a 5167. Where this watch really pulls ahead of any Aquanaut is the fact that, in a lot of ways, there's a tremendous amount of hype behind the Aquanaut right now, and I don't think the market will be able to sustain those prices. Whereas Breguet is pretty much at a historic low ebb, and consider what you get. You're getting a 65-hour power reserve to the Patek's roughly 40. You're getting a solid gold rose lathe dial. That's a solid gold dial that features rose lathe patterns out from the center. You're getting a watch that is substantially hand finished, and if you turn it over, guess what? You're getting more rose lathe engine turning as there's guilloche on the golden rotor. You're getting a silicone hairspring for anti-magnetism, just like you would get on the Patek. You're just getting a longer power reserve because this is also a dual mainspring barrel. You can actually see the dual mainspring barrels poking up under their barrel bridge. It is a slim watch at just about 11 millimeters thick and
I'll try this bad boy on
still
so
100 meters water resistant, guys. That's an aquatic watch. You take that in the water, effectively no difference between the 120 of the Aquanaut and 100 of this. This is just a more finely finished dial, and let's face it, what side of the watch do you look at more often?
So the only quirk to the watch for me is that you have lugs that extend pretty far out of the case, which makes it fit a little bit large on my wrist. I wish that they were a little bit shorter, but again, that's just, you know, something that I would have to get over while wearing the watch. And I think that this particular watch, you know, they make it with a silver dial. I particularly like the black dial the best. But, you know, it's a watch that is flying majorly under the radar right now. And it's not something that you see as many requests for, but I think that it's a watch that everybody should be talking about and looking at.
And you should look at the quality of the clasp, too. A lot of sports style watches, even from luxury brands, back you into some sort of a pin buckle. Here, not only does it have a full deploying clasp, as it should be, but the bottom line is it is a very highly stylized and nicely finished piece. Also, look at the quality of the case. These are cold rolled case. They're stamped, and then the coining is achieved by cold rolling and hand finishing to clean them up. The lugs are soldered. The strap is held on by screws. This is about as good as it gets in terms of manufacture. There's a lot of expensive finishing, assembly, and specification here. And although Brian does feel that the lugs flare out a bit too much, there is a flip side advantage to that, which is that you get a 39mm watch that has the wrist presence of a much larger timepiece.
That is true. And, you know, for some of you guys in the chat that are critical of the strap, you know, it is what it is. You know, it's got that waffle texture to it. I mean, you can get a leather for it. I happen to love this particular rubber strap. I love the softness of it. You know, I think that a stiff rubber strap sometimes, to me, doesn't have that same wearability as, you know, a soft rubber that really hugs the wrist, and it doesn't feel, you know, it feels like the only thing on you is the case of the watch, and it's almost like the strap is just like air.
And the one thing I just wanted to highlight, didn't mean to grab that away from you, is that it's nicely evacuated on the bottom. If you want to look at what an absolute top-of-the-line rubber strap looks like on the underside, it's always hollowed out so the wrist can breathe, and by removing material, you make it more flexible. And again, this is a strap that is thoughtfully designed for really intense hot weather, aquatic use, and sports use. Look at what a more, you know, fashion-oriented rubber strap looks like on the underside. You don't have those evacuated pockets. The wrist can't breathe. You know, it really doesn't have extra flexibility engineered into it. This will last a long time, but this is comfortable for us, a real sports watch.
Well, big difference between these two is that this
how
watch,
will be used.
Yeah, I mean, well, this watch is the, you know, patented Hublot Gummy Croc. So what's so special about this watch is, and to give it credit, is you have actual crocodile. Here, I'll let you hold it and show it. You have actual crocodile that is stitched, that is stitched into the rubber. So what this allows you to have is you're not going to have that, you know, how a crocodile strap sort of wears out on the underside. You know, as you wear this watch, and again, you probably are wearing this watch under, you know, a more sporty condition if you're wearing a rubber strap watch or it's a big bang, you're not going to have the crocodile portion wear out nearly as fast. So this watch will last a lot longer. The crocodile portion is treated, you know, I mean, again, it's not completely resistant to water, but it is, you know, technically water resistant. And you have the rubber underside, which allows this particular strap to last much longer.
I feel like this is the official watch of Cyndi Lauper circa like 1986. Moving on.
Moving on. So, you know, we've got a little bit of time left. So here we will go with a, call it modern classic. This is a watch that is obviously getting a lot more attention now as Cartier has re-released the Cintre. So this is not the Cintre. This is actually the Tank American. So this watch came out after the Cintre. And what's so cool about this watch is you've got that retro Cartier vibe. You've got an elongated case. It's got a funkiness to it that doesn't make it overly dressy, but it can be worn for dress. It's traditional. What sets it apart from the Cintre, where you have, you know, the curved tank, is that it's got a flat underside. So the watch actually sits up a little bit more, and I think that it's got a little bit more wrist presence than what the Cintre has.
It does. It's not quite as long and narrow as the Cintre, and it's not quite as slim of shoulder, which is to say that the flanking members of the bezel are thicker on the Tank American. The Cintre is a much older style that actually emerged out of the 1920s and 30s Art Deco era, whereas the American was originally envisioned in the mid-1980s and came to market in 1989. It's not as common as you would expect, as it's only been periodically produced. And some of the precious metal variants have been the most exquisite and most memorable. This one's actually white gold, and it's exceptionally thin. It's only about 8 millimeters thick, which is to say it sits nice and flat to the wrist even though it's not cambered. It's about, I want to say, 44 millimeters lug to lug and about 26 wide, which is to say it wears much longer across the wrist than something that's more rectangular, a la a Reverso. This is a handsome watch with a lot of style, and just as the Cartier CP collection is becoming more and more recognized, the less common white metal Cartier timepieces from the 2000s and the 90s are really being rediscovered right now, especially as Cartier itself is kind of recommitting to its classic styles over the last few years.
So answering a few questions from the chat real quick. Steve Bowden, the watch does not have a pink tinge. There's actually a red countdown screen in front of us that was reflecting off the dial. So it is just a true silver dial, and somebody from our IT department will probably get filleted for that. The answering Sebastian, we do refinish a lot of the watches if they do need it. So we've got one of the most talented watchmaking departments in the business. All of our watches that come in pre-owned come in for inspection, and if they need an overhaul, they get overhauled. If they need a light touch-up, they get touched up. And we do our best to sell the watches and I'd say as close to factory condition as possible without changing or ruining the overall integrity of the watch. So we're not going to over polish something down to the bare bones if it's going to fundamentally change the the nature of the case.
Yes. Three things. We're much more heavily invested in restoring factory finish than most shops. We can do rhodium plating on cases that are rhodium plated. Laser welding. We actually have a laser welder and folks trained to use it. We have personnel who've worked at the brands themselves, and we have red lines. We're not going to refinish a watch that's under warranty because opening it would void the warranty. We're not going to just reflexively refinish a vintage watch because we're smarter than that. We know it's like a dial replacement on a tritium dial. There's some lines you don't cross. So yeah, the bottom line is if refinishing doesn't make the watch better or more original than it started, we're not going to do it.
Exactly. And there's a lot of watches that come in where we leave the refinishing up to the discretion of the future owner. Collectible Pateks, collectible Rolexes, Journes, so on and so forth, all the way down the list where, we might not think that it's completely necessary. So we leave it up to the discretion of the buyer, say, hey, this watch is sort of being sold in this condition. If you want, we can definitely refinish it. If not, that's totally up to you. And, sometimes as a courtesy, if we are selling a watch before refinishing, we'll offer the customer the option down the line to say, hey, obviously, watch dependent. Hey, if you don't want to get it polished now, that's okay. Wear it, enjoy it, and send it back to us in 6 months to a year, and we'll refund it. We'll refinish the watch for you at no charge.
So a couple questions. I want to hit some of these points. Questions about the Cartier CP collection. What this was effectively the predecessor to Cartier Fine Watchmaking, which is kind of the haute de gamme that's in place now. 1998 to 2008, they released a range, mostly of their classic models, reimagined in precious metals with high horology movements built by the likes of JLC and Piaget and THA, which was a sort of white label movement house founded by F.P. Journe, Denis Flageolet, and Vianney Halter. All of these watches were rare. Almost all of them were a limited series of some sort, either by limited production capacity or actual numbered editions. And all of them are gaining in value now. I would say the most collectible at the moment are the Tanka V with the dual dials and the mono pusher, the Tortue mono pusher. Those are the ones that you really want to look at if you're interested in CP as an investment. Other question coming in from True Lie asking, is it okay to wear a manual wind watch daily as an only watch? Will it get excessive?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's fine.
He has a mechanical question. Will it get excessive wear from winding? No. No, it won't.
No, I mean, again, it's not going to function really any differently than an automatic watch that's running all the time. So, it's not going to wear out any more or any less. The most important factors are how do you feel about having to wind your watch consistently every other day? And, of course, one of the biggest issues with manual wind watches is user error or, overwinding, pulling out the crown too hard. So, any time where you're opening the crown, closing the crown, obviously, if you know what you're doing, that's great. But, you leave yourself open to exposing the watch to the elements and, things of that nature.
I would say the only way this could be a problem, and this is why they don't have manual wind dive watches, is if you had a threaded crown with a threaded sleeve that you had to screw in and out and in and out and in and out. This is the original reason Panerai went to the device protecting the crown, because they had those manual wind calibers in what were effectively dive watches. So that was not a great idea. And if you had to manually wind a watch with a really water-resistant crown with multiple seals, that would wear out very quickly. So the important thing to remember is almost any dress watch is going to be a very simple crown arrangement. Almost any watch that needs to be wound daily is not going to be a screw down. Just remember, you're either using the automatic system all day long or you're winding the crown once a day. It's really a wash. And in terms of manual wind movements, just be smart about it. Wind slowly and deliberately.
Exactly.
Wait for the resistance, and
Don't
then when you
rush
feel it, yeah. And on a vintage watch, just take it slow. The ratchet wheels can be a little bit delicate. That's the only case where I would say maybe you don't want to wear a manual wind every day. I've seen some older Rolex Daytonas, like, 6239s from the 60s, where the ratchet wheel is sufficiently weak that you'd worry about breaking the click if you just used it every day. But that's a special case, and if you're there, I think you know it. Otherwise, manual wind, go for it. It's just an interaction with your watch.
And if you're scared about overwinding, you don't need to wind to capacity every single day. If you pick up the watch in the morning and you're winding every single day, a lot of these watches have 48-hour power reserves at the at a bare minimum. So you can wind it 70-80%. You know your watch, so you'll know how much you need to wind it. But wind it 70-80%, and then you don't have to worry about overwinding, and you just know that you have to do it every day.
Yeah. A question from Yahia Balba asking, Tim, can a limited edition watch have a serial number of 00? Yes.
And we just took one in today.
Yes, it can.
So we just took in a Senna Hublot skeletonized tourbillon with a 00 out of 41. So if you're looking for a 00, we have one for you.
Yeah, if you're into the double aught, just know this. With some series, yes. With some series, no. So if you see something you like and you have any doubts, chances are any series that was issued with the number 00 has some sort of record at the original manufacturer.
Exactly.
Just give them a ring. They're usually happy to help. Tell them you're looking at number 00, and they'll very quickly be able to tell you fact or BS.
Right. So, again, not to cut us off, and we really appreciate all the questions, but we are over time right now. So, guys, thank you so much for logging on. We appreciate all the questions. If you guys want to email Tim or myself, please do so. You guys can email questions in advance, and I'm happy to talk about them on the show, bring in watches that interest you guys. It's an interactive show, so the more you guys participate, hopefully, the more that, we can interact. So my name is Brian. This is Tim.
He's got a lady at home.
I've got a lady at home, and thank you guys for logging on.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.